So, what is the likelihood that if Trump were elected that he'd end up dictator of the United States? Legacy media is trying to freak out people who still function in a world where television is a valid source of information. They are asserting that if Trump wins the next election, he will become a dictator. So how likely is that assertion? Well, Trump keeps getting compared to this fellow to the side of me here. And for this video, I need to mention his name a bunch of times, yet I'd like to avoid this video being suppressed. YouTube really sucks and is run by demented bastards for making content creators jump through hoops like this. Uh, Due to a quirk of fate, this guy pictured here was almost Adolf Schicklgruber. His father was born illegitimate from an unknown father, and for part of his life he was saddled with the name Schicklgruber. At some point, he petitioned the church to have his stepfather declared his biological father, which typically wasn't granted. His stepfather's name was Heidler. For some reason, they recorded it as the guy we all know here next to me. So for the rest of the video, well, Heil Schicklgruber. You get the idea. Many people get hung up on the personalities of history and fail to recognize the forces that put these personalities into their positions in history. A major element of the forces of history are the national establishments of a country. It's a rare occurrence when an individual gets to a position of power without the acquiescence of the establishment. The first element in making Mr. Schicklgruber even possible was something known as Volk mythology. Volk being a German word that translates directly to the people, but isn't quite used that way. It's not any people can be a Volk, it has to be German people. There isn't a version of it known as English Volk. Uh, there's no Italian Volk. There is only the Volk. Now, this is a weird mythology that started up in the early 1800s that posited the idea that the German people were special beyond all others, that there was a mystical bond between the people of German origin that set them up towards a transformative destiny. The Volkish concept would lead to the false Aryan race theory, as well as laying the groundwork for Mr. Schicklgruber's German socialism. All people of 75% greater German blood were brethren in the Volk. The English, the Scandinavians, and any German abroad with sufficient purity was Volk. The overwhelming majority of Germans were welcome in this classification, and most Germans had been brought up with the idea of Volk either to believe it or at least be fairly familiar with it. There is no similar idea in America. The closer you get to an idea of a unified, immutable, sorry about that, immutable traits being let's start that from the beginning. Okay, the closer you get to the idea of unified, immutable traits being the reason people should work together, the smaller the group of people you end up with who agree with you. The German government, created after World War I, was despised by the German establishment and not popular with the people. And by government, I'm not talking about political parties or the individuals in charge. The establishment and the people hated the actual structure and function of its government. The goal of the establishment was to restore the monarchy as it was before the war, putting a strong man on the throne. The people had many different ideas, including monarchy. Many factions favored tearing down the entire government and rebuilding it as something else. In short, the establishment and a majority of Germans were actively working towards an alternative form of government. The US government is an active manifestation of our establishment. The wealthy families, the corporations, the military, the banks, the think tanks, the lobbyists, and a large portion of the bureaucracy are happy with the form of government we have. It's a system evolved to create stability and create many areas for collegial power struggles that rarely make changes beyond what even a handful of Americans might even notice. To make a change on a Schicklgruber-like level would require the violent deaths of large portions of the establishment. Schicklgruber, by the time the German socialists were making gains in their parliament, had two paramilitary organizations backing him, the SA and the SS, which numbered over 600,000 men, all of whom were armed and trained. These men were used for security and sent in to shut down the marches and rallies of political opponents, and were also used to make the changes in government once Schicklgruber's boys were in charge. Trump has no known organized cadres. During the January 6th incident, he was able to call up 250,000 protesters that clearly had no organizational skills, or weapons. The German government was inherently unstable and, by poor design, made autocratic government almost inevitable. Their president was elected by popular vote and had the power to dissolve parliament at will. He could appoint anybody chancellor, regardless of how many people were seated in parliament. He could also dismiss parliament at will. A proportional voting system almost ensured that no party could hold a majority. Worse, their constitution had something called Article 48, which allowed the chancellor to declare emergencies and rule by decree, as well as take command of federal troops to compel German states to comply with laws they had passed. In the 10 years of the Republic prior to German socialist rule, Article 48 was used more than 300 times. This included forcing through economic plans, dispatching troops when states refused government orders, and nullifying trial by jury. This is all before Schicklgruber even comes to power. The US system may not work the way we like it to, but it lacks the general ability to enforce decree-like rules, and it's not easy to ignore our Congress or the court system. For example, during the disease of unknown origin that occurred in 2020, mandates were implemented by state governments and local governments because the federal government lacked the authority to implement most of those measures. Schicklgruber had a broad philosophy of government that had been developed over 10 years, albeit a very evil one. Trump appears to have no particular philosophy of government that I'm able to discern. There's a lot of noise coming from legacy media over the Heritage Foundation's transition plan called the Mandate for Leadership. This is nothing new at all. This has been published for every single president since and including Reagan. It's over 700 pages and has comprehensive reform and reduction suggestions for almost every part of government. Most of these changes aren't particularly radical. They are some of the same recommendations that have been coming from the moderate right for over 40 years. I've read a portion of the text, both picking out major areas of government as well as picking spots at random. All the recommendations are very much constitutional and, for the most part, would require huge amounts of cooperation from the executive branch bureaucracy, Congress, and the courts. There's no indication that Trump plans to follow these recommendations. He didn't in 2016. Something else causing a buzz in the land of newspapers and TVs is the Heritage Project 2025. Uh, this one they may not have done before. Essentially, they're trying to build a roster for the plum list and the first level fill for 2025 Republican administration. The fact that they try to make this, and what I mean by they, the media, tries to make this sound ominous, is either outright propaganda or total ignorance. The Plum List is a group of 4,000 executive branch positions that a new president has a right to fill as he walks through the door. The people filling the jobs fully expect to lose their jobs as those 4,000 walk in the door. Prior to Trump, every president did this. As a noob, Trump failed to do this and was stuck with a transition team full of Obama appointees that were hostile to his transition. This is what what Heritage seems to be attempting to avoid in terms of a repeat. Second, in 2016, Trump trusted the Republican Party to help him with the task of filling out government positions. They did, but they saddled him with progressives and neocons who were hostile to his plan. Heritage appears to be doing a pre-screen so that Trump has friendlies to pick from should he win. And there's another item that's being talked about, which is called Schedule F. This was an executive order that Trump put in place in 2016 but never carried out, that he promises to revive. It shifts 20,000 federal employees from protected civil service positions to political appointee positions, which means they can be fired at will. Executive orders are perfectly lawful if the order pertains solely to the running of the executive branch. All federal employees are members of the executive branch. Consider there are 2.1 million federal employees. Shifting less than 1% of the federal employee status to making them fireable probably won't change the nature of government significantly. In short, it's perfectly legal for any president to do this. Bureaucracy is deeply entrenched and arrogant. Any leader, including Trump, can only move in incremental ways. Consider that during Trump's first term, he attempted to disengage from Syria, and the military ignored his orders or just stopped briefing him on his actions. Their actions. He attempted to improve relations with North Korea, and the State Department scuttled his initiatives. Point being is a bureaucracy has the power to bring to a halt or slow down any efforts the executive branch is attempting to put through. The point being, the federal bureaucracy is a huge part of our establishment. The government can't run without them. There's no way to replace them all. The military leadership is willing to undermine any president if they don't like his orders. Our government is so stable that it's practically unmovable. Trump may be able to shift a few things around at the margins, but there's no vast army of people to fill the bureaucracy, nor is there anybody who can challenge the military for him. In short, this isn't Weimar Germany, and Trump is no Schnickelgruber. So, in the comments below, have you been hearing this chatter from legacy media? What do you think of it? What do you think? Is Trump a Schickelgruber in the offing, getting prepared to take over, or do you think this is complete hooey? Please smash the like button. If you've been brought here by the YouTube algorithm and you're not a usual subscriber, check out my other titles. I do a lot of different things you might find interesting. Consider subscribing. And if you know someone who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.